Well, Laura Bruns, I was so excited to get to bring you up here and interview you. I just absolutely love your story.
Thank you.
And after we were talking the other night on the phone, trying to figure out where to start, what elements to say, was wondering if could take you back. Laura, can I take you back just a little bit to an older job that you had just a while back, and can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so I worked for DSS for 19 years. I was under the belief, or am under the belief, that, you get out of school, you find a good job, you keep it, you retire from it. That's what my parents had done, my brothers, my husband. So I had just been in this job, just going along and planning my life to be there.
So what did you do at that job?
I worked with foster parents and children in foster care, did a lot of adoption work, social work.
Okay. It was very obvious you loved that job.
Yeah, I did.
So what happened with that job?
So probably 2 years before I quit that job, management changed.
Okay.
And there was a lot of different things happening, and the environment just changed in a negative way for me.
So what happened at the end of that job?
So I had always joked over the years that if I was ever going to leave that job, God was going to have to push me out. Like, not nudge, like push. And it just got increasingly worse, and my health was bad, getting worse. And I think it was affecting my home life and everything. And so one day a comment was made to me that was just like, I'm like, that is such a lie. That is not who I am. And I just wrote my resignation, cleaned out my office, and on Monday morning, I, was going to put my 2 weeks in. And so I left that job just, I couldn't stay another minute. So looking back at it, like, yes, he pushed me like hard out of that job. So
then what happened?
So I didn't have another job lined up. I was off work for 6 months. And in that time, I think that's the first and only time in my life I've actually understood, like, be still. I got to spend a lot of time healing. And it took longer than 6 months, but, healing. I would always have like a little routine in the morning. I'd lay in the bathtub, I'd pray, I'd just kind of like be and see where I was supposed to go next. God was really sweet to me. I was never in fear during that time. It was just the most calm time. I don't know if my husband felt that way, but I did, throughout that. So
I remember watching you during that time, and that's how you looked. And where did your peace come from during that time?
Well, those 2 years that I was in a job where I felt like my belief system was different than other people's belief system, or management, I guess. I just learned to rely on God, and sometimes it was like, just get me to noon, or just get me to the end of the day, or just tell me what to say in this situation where I don't know what to say, because I'd always been so confident in my job and my work, and so I just learned to really rely on him for those daily things.
That constant leaning in is just beautiful, and that constant dialogue. There was a verse. Do you remember the verse?
You might have to help me with it, but it's you do not receive because you have not asked, or something.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's right like that. And I remember you said at one point you wanted to work with hospice after you left your other job, but you didn't think you could.
No.
Could you tell us a little bit about that?
So, social worker in hospice, that's not a job in Mitchell that is, there's a lot of positions, and it oftentimes requires a master's degree, which I don't have. So just a lot of obstacles, but it always just, anytime someone would ask, like, what's your dream job? If you had a dream, I'm like, I would love to work in hospice. That's just always what my answer would be.
So going back to that verse, you do not have because you do not ask. So you started asking?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. And then what happened?
Well, I had a lot of odd jobs. I spent, a year and a half doing a lot of different things, learning a lot of different skills. And then I was presented with the opportunity there was a job opening in Mitchell in hospice that was part-time. So I applied for it.
Okay. How had God prepared you for a job with hospice?
Well, I would have to look way back. My mom's a nurse. When I was little, I remember when it was she would come home from work and then she'd go back to town and sit with people who were dying. She would help transport people to nursing homes. Like we would go with her and the, elderly or very sick people. My aunt passed away in 2013 and I was in hospice. And so we spent so much time with her and I wasn't afraid of it.
When you said, I have to go way back, and looking at your mom, it is so amazing to look back at where God has taken us, isn't it? When we can look back and see, oh, he was preparing me all along for something like that. Could you share a bit about your dad in hospice? And can you tell me first, though, about a fear you had?
Yeah. So when my dad was probably 50, he had a little gathering because he was a teacher at the VOTEC. And all of his students were out there and we were having a barbecue and they did like a hog pile on him. So he was on the bottom and then there was like 20, teenage kids on top of him. And I remember this fear like that he wasn't going to be okay. His lungs weren't great. And so I just was afraid he was going to die. And that fear like stuck with me from that day. Like it's a vivid memory up until probably a year ago. I always had a fear that he would pass away.
And so, so there was another part you added the other night on the phone about a ring.
Oh, so I've worked in hospice for 6 months. And I get to sit with people and I get to be with families and support them. And I've had a couple different experiences, but a man that I was sitting with that I didn't know, I hadn't done his admit or anything. And I was just sitting with him and I was holding his hand and the ring the Black Hills Gold ring that he was wearing is my dad's exact ring. And I recognized it and remembered it and,
Wow.
Yeah.
It's amazing how God can use anything to comfort us along the way and to prepare us.
Well, and because it wasn't my own dad, but it was his ring. And so it just was like, okay, this would be okay if this was how it was. And this was my dad laying here.
So Laura, can you tell me what your dad's passing was like?
So the hospice team had come in and he had been on hospice for 3 months. And so throughout that whole time they were coming in, caring for him, building rapport with him. He was just a jokester. And so spending time with him and spending time with my mom. And then he started to decline a couple weeks ago. Or a couple weeks prior to that, my brothers had come home and, people had come to visit. And then the last 4 days I got to spend at my mom and dad's house taking care of him with my mom. My mom took care of him. I just helped. But, and just, I had made sure to tell him I loved him and made him tell me back because he's really stoic and we don't really have that kind of relationship. But, just kissing all over his face and his forehead and just talking to him and stuff and making sure he had his medicine and things like that. And so he passed away on Saturday a couple of weeks ago and we had been sitting at the kitchen table working on some paperwork and it was a rainy, cold day and the sun came out just like an August day, like bright, and the grass was wet and it just sparkled. And I remember saying to my mom, oh my gosh, the sun is out. It's not supposed to be sunny today. And I think we just really wanted it to be because we were starting to get tired and exhausted. And so I went around the corner to check on him before I got his medicine for him. And he was gone.
What a beautiful way to go home.
Yeah. It was. And he was so peaceful, for all 4 of those days. He did great. He was so content.
So, Laura, my last question. You learned to discern God's steps and to be still and wait for his lead throughout the whole process. And I felt so blessed being able to have a front row seat as your friend and watching that. And in all the way through, it screamed hope. What do you have to say about all of it now, looking at the whole thing?
So I've learned that the lessons come in the valley more than on the mountaintop. And so I've tried to just stay in the moment and really see what the blessings are in it. It hasn't even been 2 weeks since my dad passed away. And of course, he was a very special person to me, always provided just unconditional love for me. So I haven't even started grieving that loss, but I want to remember the sweetness of what God gave me in these last, couple years with my dad. And that when I'm grieving in the future, that I can look back at it and just know that he's not going to leave me then. He hasn't left me. He's been with me, and he's given me so many sweet nuggets along the way that he'll continue to do that for me. So I just want to remember that.
After we got done talking last night, when I crawled into bed and I was praying about what questions to ask you, what came to mind was the vine. And how, he is the vine and we are the branches. And if we stay close to him and that communication, and he has a plan for your life, and a vine bears fruit in the end. And just looking at your story and how you loved your old job so much and the path that he took you on, up to the point of taking you to hospice and then getting to walk your own dad home. And now the fruit that will be there as you sit with others.
Yeah.
And you've been through it.
Yeah.
And if I ever have to put anybody in hospice again, I'd love to have you and your team right alongside me. But, just how beautiful that all is. So thank you so much,
Thank
Laura,
you
for sharing your story.
Thank you.